Hello, dear listener. Wherever you are right now, I invite you to to settle in, and to rest your body. Let the muscles in your shoulders loosen just a little. Let your jaw go slack. Let your eyes grow heavy, but peaceful. You're safe here, and the world can wait. Take a gentle breath in, and then let it go. Into your nose, out through your mouth, soft tight, like a sigh across the grass. Tonight, I have a story for you, a quiet one, a story of mists and meadows, of forgotten names and lavender dreams. And it all begins not in a castle nor a battlefield, but in a field of dew-kissed wildflowers, where the fog rolls low and the morning is still. Our story begins in the hush before sunrise, in a meadow just beyond the reach of stone battlements. A knight lies still. His armor is dulled with time. Scratches etch across the chest plate like runes of some long-forgotten tale. His helmet lies nearby, tilted gently in the grass, collecting drops of silver dew. The knight stirs. His hand reaches slowly through the tall grass, fingers brushing against the cool stems. And then he sits up. There is no memory behind his eyes. No name, no origin, no banner to recall. Only the moment. The breath in his lungs. Only the scent of lavender. Familiar. Soothing. A whisper from a dream he cannot remember. And so he rises, each movement slow, as though the very air resists the pull of waking. He walks, led by the gentle breeze that carries that calming scent. Step by step, the mist curling around his legs like a silver stream. Somewhat not far, a cottage awaits. Down the meadow path, between clusters of bluebells and early thyme, he walks. Birdsong is hushed this morning, as if even the robins know not to disturb this strange waking. The knight's boots sink slightly into the soft earth. Not muddy, just damp with memory. He pauses. A breeze lifts the edge of his cloak, and he sees something woven into it. A small sigil, embroidered in fading thread. A lion? A star? He cannot tell. It means nothing to him now. But perhaps the wind shifts again. Lavender, stronger now. With it the hint of something warm, like firewood, crackling somewhere unseen. He follows. There, beyond the veil of fog, a thatched roof. Stone walls, rounded smooth by the passing of many seasons. A wooden door, painted in a shade of green so faded it's nearly silver. And beside it, a garden. Lavender, blooming despite the early chill. Sage, marjoram, kemma. Every herb placed with care, not just for beauty, but for healing. A healer lives here. He steps closer. A chime rings softly above the door. Not the jangle of metal, but the tinkling of dried shells, woven with thin cords and patience. They sing with the wind, gentle and lulling. He raises a hand to knock. But before he does, the door opens. A woman stands there. Older than spring, younger than winter. Her eyes, the color of soft earth after rain. Her hair, braided back, streaked with gray like threads of moonlight. She smiles, but says nothing. Instead she gestures. And he unsure why, he steps inside. The cottage is quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps around your bones like a blanket. A hearth crackles low. The scent of lavender is stronger here, but now joined by mint, by lemon balm, by the faint trace of honey. She leads him to a wooden stool. Not a throne, not a bench, just a place to sit and rest. And so he does. And she begins to hum. She doesn't ask his name. Perhaps she already knows he cannot answer. Instead, she begins to grind leaves with a smooth stone. She adds them to a bowl of warm water. The steam rises, and with it, sleepiness. This is for memory, she whispers. For the loss of it. He listens. Not to the words, but to the tone. The way her voice is part wind, part flame, part lullaby. She dips a cloth in the lavender water. Presses it gently to his temples. The room seems to blur. Let us pause here, dear listener, and rest a little deeper. Picture the scene. A night with no name, wrapped in the scent of healing herbs. In a cottage forgotten by time, where the fire glows warm and the shadows drift softly across the floor. The healer whispers of old beliefs, that lavender, when crushed with wine, can pull dreams from beneath the skin. That those who sleep in lavender fields may wake with glimpses of who they were. The night's eyes begin to close, and the healer keeps humming. Outside, the fog begins to lift. Not fast. Just enough to reveal the tips of distant hills. Sunlight doesn't break through. It seeps. Soft gold between the trees. A warmth, gentle as breath. And inside, the night dreams. Let your mind wander now, as his does. Drift into the quiet of the garden, past the rows of herbs, past the worn wooden fence where ivy climbs like lazy serpents. There's a little stream there, barely more than a whisper of water, but it sings. Just beneath the soil, you can feel it hum. Beneath this cottage, old roots stretch deep, and old stories sleep even deeper. The healer's name is Marin. She was born under a comet, or so her mother said. And she has lived in this cottage since before the war. Which war? All of them. Or none of them. She remembers faces, and herbs, and songs for fevers. But names, she says, are like mist. They come and go. And this night, she calls him Ash. Because he arrived like soot on the wind. Grit, quite. And from something that had burned. Ash wakes on the second morning. There is a cat on his chest. But with one white paw. Its eyes blink slowly, then close again. He doesn't mind. The hearth is still crackling. Marin is tending her jars. The light through the window slants in golden rays, catching the motes of dust like falling stars. Dreams? She asks without looking. He nods. He thinks there were trees, and a woman in blue, and a name almost spoken. She smiles. Good, she says. You're beginning to remember the wrong way round. And so the days drift, like petals down a stream. Ash does not search for his past. He helps in the garden. He learns the names of leaves again. Not sword techniques, not battle cries, but the difference between mint and balm. The way yarrow must be dried before it calms a wound. He sleeps by the hearth. And he dreams. Always, the scent of lavender surrounds him. Sometimes, Marin tells him things. Of how knights once feared dreams, believing some were sent by demons, others by saints. Of how some wore herbs in their boots to ward off spirits. And how in the old tongue, a forgotten name could become a curse. And sometimes, she simply hums. The name still will not come. But he does not mind. There is something peaceful in the forgetting. Something healing in the not knowing. Each day is just this. A bowl of stew. A handful of herbs. The creak of wood in the wind. And yet, at night, there is always that woman in blue. And so the quiet days slipped by, one by one, like smooth pebbles dropped into a still pond. The knight, whom Marin called Ash, did not search for who he had been. He learned instead to exist within the moment. Each one, slower than the last. Each one, softer than the next. The world outside the healer's garden seemed forgotten. Or perhaps it had simply fallen asleep. Ash would rise with the sunlight and walk barefoot into the mist-wet grass. He would touch the leaves with reverence, as if greeting old friends he'd somehow always known. The lavender would brush against his fingertips, and its perfume would steady his breath. Each night brought dreams, and each dream was the same. A woman in blue. She stood in a clearing of silver trees, bathed in moonlight, speaking a name, but always just before the word could form, the dream would dissolve. Ash would wake with his heart slow and heavy. Not afraid, just wondering. Marin said little, but in her silence there was understanding. She, too, had known forgettings of her own. Not dramatic, not sudden, just the gentle vanishing of things that once mattered. Memory, she whispered once. Slick tea. Too hot and it scalds. Too cold and it fades. But steep just right, it can warm the soul. And so she made it, with crushed mint and a hint of lemon balm, and poured it slowly, as if time itself were waiting at the rim of the cup. Strength. And with every swallow he felt more real, more rooted, more present in this unnamed life. On the seventh morning, the wind changed. It swept across the hills with a different tone, not harsh, but filled with intention. It carried something new with it, the scent of pine smoke, a distant crack of hooves, and voices, muffled as if underwater. Ash turned toward the hills, something deep inside stirring like a turning wheel. Marin stepped beside him. She did not look out, only said, "You may not remember your name, but the world remembers you." That night, Ash did not sleep near the hearth. He walked into the garden instead, drawn by the moonlight and the lull of the distant stream. He stood among the lavender, letting its scent swirl around him like a cloak. And then he heard it, a whisper, not from the earth, not from Marin, but from within himself. "Selim," it said. He blinked. The word hung in the air like breath in winter. Was it a name? A place? A promise? It meant sky in the old tongue. He did not know how he knew that, only that the name felt familiar, like the outline of a dream. He returned to the cottage slowly. The door creaked softly open. Marin, at her workbench, looked up but said nothing. He sat. And this time, she added a single sprig of lavender. "Selim," he said aloud, testing it. Marin nodded, only once. Her eyes held no surprise, only stillness. Ash, Selim, closed his eyes. And this time he saw more. The woman in blue stood closer now. She wore a circlet of silver, and tears shimmered on her cheeks. Behind her, the castle burned, not in terror but in farewell. A ceremony of endings. She reached out, touched his chest, right over the place where his name once lived, and whispered, "Return when the flowers bloom twice." Then vanished. Ash, Selim, opened his eyes. The fire crackled low. The cottage swayed gently with the wind. The world remained unchanged. But inside, something shifted. The dream was not a dream, or if it was, it had roots. Deep ones. The next morning, Ash rose before dawn. He packed nothing, took nothing, except a pouch of dried lavender Marin handed him in silence, and a smooth stone, warm from the hearth. When he turned to leave, Marin placed her palm over his heart. "Not all journeys are forward," she said. "Some are inward, but all roads curve back to the beginning." Then she returned to her herbs, and he walked down the path, into the mist. Again, the forest welcomed him. Its trees bowed slightly in the breeze. Its moss grew thick, like velvet beneath his boots. Ash did not follow a trail. He followed a feeling, a sense of something waiting. Not danger, not glory, just recognition. He passed under arches of twisted willow. He crossed a brook where frogs blinked slowly from the edges. And each step took him closer to the place in his dreams. By midday, the sun floated pale and sleepy above the canopy. Ash paused near a hollow log and listened to the hush of leaves, the creak of old branches, and the faint sound of humming. He followed it, through bramble and bloom, through shadow and shimmer, and then he saw her. Not the woman from his dreams, but a girl, a child, perhaps 8 years old, sitting beside a patch of violets, weaving them into a crown. She looked up and smiled. "Hello, Selim," she said with certainty. He froze. The name on her lips was not foreign. It was anchored. "No. Do you remember me?" she asked. He shook his head. "That's all right," she said. "You gave me this." She held up a pendant, carved with a tiny symbol of a star and a lion. He reached for his cloak. The same emblem, frayed and faint, but there. A memory flickered. Castle. A girl, younger still, hiding under a table while soldiers passed. He had knelt, given her the pendant, and told her to remember light. He sank to his knees. The child reached out, took his hand in hers, small and steady. "You came back," she said, "just like you promised." He nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to remember." She led him to a cottage at the edge of the trees, smaller than Marin's, but filled with the same scent of herbs and smoke. There an older woman waited, the child's grandmother. She looked at Ash and said, "So the knight has returned, without his name, but with his soul intact." He stayed that night, and in the dreams that followed, the woman in blue spoke again. She said, The stars do not forget even when you do. Follow the river, and you will find the tower. Ash awoke before dawn. The cottage still slept. But the child had left a note beside his bed. Thank you for keeping the light. We'll keep it burning here until you come back again. He stepped out, and the sky was pale pink. Lavender clouds drifted gently overhead. And below, the river flowed. He followed it, and so Ash walked, through valleys softened by fog, past stone bridges, half crumbled by time, along wildflower banks where bees whispered to blooms. He remembered fragments now. A training yard, a coronation, a hand held tightly in his own. But names were still shadows. The river whispered them. Each bend hummed with meaning, and somewhere ahead, the tower waited. Let your breath grow slower now. Like the river, like Ash's footsteps in the morning hush. He walks not to remember, but to arrive, to reach a place his soul already knows. A tower made of pale stone, wrapped in ivy, guarding a garden that blooms only at dusk. And inside, the truth he left behind. The path wound softly now, following the river's hush. It curved through old birch trees, their trunks pale as candle wax, their leaves fluttering like lullabies. Ash walked quietly, not with urgency, but with the kind of peace that comes when you know you are drawing nearer to something sacred. Each footstep pressed gently into moss, and overhead, the sunlight played softly. Through a green gold canopy, the river, ever beside him, spoke in quiet tones. Not words, but rhythms. Little murmurs over stone, gentle swirls around fallen branches. A hush that seemed to say, keep going, you are almost there. Sometimes, Ash would close his eyes while walking, trusting the feel of earth beneath him, letting memory drift in, like morning mist. He remembered now. A name spoken to him by a woman wearing silver rings. He was not a soldier. He had been a guardian. One sworn not to battle, but to watch, to protect a place few remembered, and fewer believed in. As twilight slipped into the sky, Ash reached a stone circle. 7 great standing stones, weathered by wind and age, each carved with a sigil barely visible. The flame, the feather, the weight, and the star. He stepped into the circle, and the world shifted. Not in violence, not with fear, but as though time itself paused. A wind stirred the tall grass, the river slowed, and a voice rose, not outside him, but within. You are close now. The tower dreams of your return. Ash knelt in the grass, closed his eyes. A vision bloomed behind his lids. A tower, tall and slender, made not of stone, but of woven vines and moonlight. It stood in a garden of glowing blossoms, where the stars hung low, as if listening. He opened his eyes. The stars above were real now, just beginning to appear. 1, 2, 5, 10. And in the distance, beyond a bend in the trees, a soft light flickered. He rose and followed. The tower appeared just before midnight. At first, it looked like part of the forest, a trick of shape and shadow. But as he drew closer, its form became clear. It was wrapped in ivy and honeysuckle, its stones soft with moss and thyme. No banners, no guards, only stillness. A place forgotten by the world, but not by him. Not anymore. He approached the entrance, a wooden archway carved with ancient runes. Not threatening, but waiting. The door creaked open at the lightest touch. Inside, silence. No torches, but a soft glow. From lanterns of crystal, hanging like captured stars. Ash stepped inside. His breath slowed. Even his heartbeat felt quiet. He climbed the spiral staircase, each step worn smooth by years of use, or perhaps by dreams. And at the very top, a chamber opened, with windows to every side. And at its center, a mirror, but not a mirror of glass. This one shimmered like still water. Its surface shifted, revealing not his face, but memories. He saw a younger version of himself, standing beside the woman in blue. They planted lavender together in a garden that would later be Marin's. He saw himself holding the hand of the little girl by the violets, giving her the pendant, promising to return. He saw a battle, not with swords, but with silence. He had chosen to forget, to protect something, or someone. And then he saw her, the woman in blue. She stepped from the mirror, not in form, but in light. She was not a ghost. She was a memory, made whole through time. "Selim," she whispered, and this time he did not flinch. "You were the keeper of the lavender gate," she said, "a guardian of sleep, a memory, of dreams. You chose to forget, so others could remember." Ash lowered his head, and the memories returned, like a tide. There had been a realm, hidden beneath the waking world, a sanctuary of peace, of dreams kept safe, and he had stood at its edge, lavender blooming around him, sworn to protect its threshold. But one day, the gate had begun to flicker, disturbed by greed or fear. To shield it, he had offered his own memory, his name, his past, and become a wanderer. Now, standing in the tower, he remembered, and in remembering, the garden bloomed again. Outside, the wind stirred gently. The stars brightened, and a path opened through the trees, lit not by lanterns, but by glowing lavender blossoms. He descended the tower slowly, his heart steady, not hurried, not uncertain. Each step down was a step back into his purpose. The path through the woods was quiet. The lavender glowed softly, lining the trail like candles. Ahead, the river split, and in its center stood an arch of stone. No bridge, just the arch, and beyond it was the gate. The lavender gate. Ash stood before it. He remembered now. This was not a place, but a passage. The crossing between the waking world and the dreaming one. He stepped forward. The mist curled around him, cool and soft. And then, he was through. He stood in a garden. Not Marin's. Not the little girl's. But the true garden. The one from the beginning. Here, lavender bloomed in colors he could not name. The air shimmered with dreamlight, and the wind whispered in languages long forgotten. At the garden's center was a pool, perfectly still, its surface reflecting not the sky, but possibilities. A voice greeted him. "You have returned, Selim." Turned. The woman in blue stood there, real now. "I am Lysena," she said, "keeper of the deep dream." "You chose to forget," she said, "to become part of the waking world, to keep this place hidden." "And now?" Ash asked softly. "Now," she replied, "you may rest, or remember, or both." He knelt beside the pool. The scent of lavender filled him. The stars above this place shimmered closer. He placed one hand in the water, and dreams poured into him, not like visions, but like warmth. He saw the ones he had guarded. Children who had slept peacefully. Artists who had dreamed worlds into being. The woman in blue, holding his hand, keeping the garden alive. And in the water's reflection, he saw his name. Not Ash, not Selim, but all of them. The night of forgotten names. The keeper of lavender. The guardian of sleep. He closed his eyes. And for the first time in many years, he rested. Not from exhaustion, but from completion. A peace beyond words, beyond time. And the garden was eternal. Not in time, but in feeling. There were no clocks here. No seasons. Only a hush, deep and tender, that lived in the roots of the lavender and the songs of the wind. Ash, Selim, the night, became still. He lay down among the flowers, and the petals did not bend beneath him. They embraced him. They remembered him. And for a while, there was only breath, and stillness, and warmth. The stars in the sky above this place shimmered low. Not cold and distant, but curious. They blinked slowly, like guardians of peace. And all around him, the dreamers slept. He could feel them. Tiny pulses of imagination, like fireflies in tall grass. Children dreaming of gentle things. Old souls dreaming of their youth. Mothers remembering lullabies. Lovers holding hands beyond memory. They were here, within the garden, held safely behind the lavender gate. Because of him, because he had once forgotten, to allow others to remember. Lucena, the woman in blue, sat beside him beneath a silver-leaf tree. She spoke in the softest tone, like wind through feathers. "There are stories," she said, "that only grow in silence. And there are names that echo more sweetly when whispered in dreams." He nodded, eyes closed, body weightless. "I am tired," he murmured. She placed her hand on his brow. "I know, but you are not broken. You have carried so many dreams, so many forgotten voices, so many tender silences. It is time for you to receive." The garden shifted. It did not move with steps or storms, but with presence. A hush like ancient harp strings, a rustling like cloth through soft wind. The lavender pulsed with soft light, and from its glow came memories, not just his, everyone's. Moments of kindness once thought lost. A baker setting out warm bread at dawn, a child releasing a firefly from cupped hands, a scribe falling asleep beside her candlelight, dreaming of stories she would never finish. They lived here, all of them, carried by the night silence, rooted in the soil he had guarded. He sat up slowly, the blossoms parting like water. "Will I stay here?" he asked. Lucena smiled gently. "Or you may return." He looked around. The trees shimmered faintly. The sky hummed a color he could not name. "If I return," he whispered, "will I forget again?" "No," she said. "You have done your forgetting. Now, you may walk the world awake." He thought of Marin, her steady hands, her lavender tea, her songs with no words. He thought of the girl in the woods, and the pendant. He thought of the river, and of the tower with no guards, only stars. "I think," he said slowly, "there is more quiet to bring into the world." Lucena nodded. "And more dreams to protect." He rose. The garden glowed around him, bidding no farewell, only offering continuation. And as he stepped once more through the mist of the lavender gate, he did not look back. Not because he didn't care, but because the garden lived inside him now. He would carry it wherever he walked. In every pause between words. In every silence after laughter. In every moment someone forgot they were safe, and remembered again. The forest welcomed him again. It was morning. The birds did not sing loudly, only small, sleepy calls. He followed the sound of the river, and felt the pulse of the earth underfoot. His steps were not hurried. He was not a man chasing memory anymore. He was a man carrying it, gently, like a folded letter, like a lullaby. He passed the stone circle again. The 7 standing stones were still, but this time, a vine had begun to grow along the one marked with a star. Just one, the tiny leaf, green and unafraid. He touched it lightly. The stone was warm. By dusk, he reached a hill overlooking the land. And from there, in the slanted amber light of the evening, he saw the tower again. Just a silhouette, but it pulsed faintly with light. He smiled. He descended into the valley. The cottage was where he left it. Marin was tending her garden. When she saw him, she said nothing, simply opened her arms, and he stepped into them, like a child returning from a journey that had no map. They sat beside the hearth that night. She poured tea, and said, "Well, you've remembered how to come home." He nodded. "I remembered everything." She raised an eyebrow. "Everything." He smiled faintly. "Enough." And they sipped in silence. That night, he slept without dreams. Not because he had none, but because they were safe now. All of them. And when he woke, the lavender outside the window bloomed a second time. Just as she'd said, the lavender bloomed a second time. Outside the cottage window, its violet flowers reached upward, bright against the soft morning mist. Ash stood at the threshold. The door opened behind him, his hand resting lightly on the wooden frame. He had not spoken yet. He simply breathed. And the garden, that quiet, living tapestry of leaf and color, breathed with him. Marin appeared beside him. She carried no basket, no shears, just a small cup of warm tea, steam curling slowly into the hush of morning. "The flowers remember," she said softly. They always do. He nodded. I thought maybe I'd wake and forget again. Marin looked at him carefully, then placed the cup into his hand. You didn't sleep to forget. You slept to rest. He sipped. The lavender and honey filled his chest like golden light. And as the sun lifted over the hills, he saw it. The path. Faint but clear. Not carved with blades. Not drawn by feet. Just known. Waiting for him. He walked once more. Past the rows of sage. Past the crooked fence. Past the garden gate that had never needed a lock. He did not carry a sword. Nor a shield. Only a pouch of dried petals. And a memory of quiet. The world had changed in his absence. Not loudly. Not violently. But subtly. Like a room that has been dusted while you sleep. Birdsong returned. The rivers ran fuller. Travelers passed him on the road, nodding gently, though they did not know why. Some touched their hearts. Others stepped aside with quiet respect. He smiled at them, the way one smiles at an old book rediscovered. He came to a village near the sea, one he remembered only in dreams. It had once been loud, filled with shouting and smoke and flags. Children played in alleys once shadowed by stone. The market hummed softly. Baskets of pears and linen and lavender oil lined the stalls. And among the crowd, he saw her. Not Lysenna, not Marin, but the girl, now grown. The one he'd given the pendant to, all those years ago beneath the violets. She wore it still, tied with a red cord around her neck. Their eyes met, and in that glance, memory passed between them, like a feather caught in wind. You came back, she said. The same words she had once whispered as a child. And this time, he answered. I never left. Only wondered. She invited him to stay. To rest. He did. For a while. He helped plant herbs in a square of garden beside her cottage. He taught the children how to listen to the wind in leaves. How to sit in stillness until the world softened around them. He taught them the names of quiet things. How to brew sleep from marjoram. How to press cloth soaked in valerian root behind the ears. How to walk barefoot through mist without waking it. He told no stories. Not with words. But the children knew. And that was enough. One day, he climbed a hill alone. Carried with him a single object. The smooth stone Marin had once placed in his palm. He knelt at the top, where the sea stretched far beyond the cliffs. And he buried the stone. Placed it carefully. Under a patch of thyme and violet, pressed the earth flat with his hand, not as a grave, but as a beginning, a seed. Years passed, and the stories spread, not tales of battle, not glory, but of a man who taught the art of silence, who wandered from village to village, carrying a pouch of lavender and a smile that made sleep come easier. Some called him the dreamwalker, others the silent knight. A few simply called him friend. Ash knew the end was near when the flowers bloomed for a third time. He sat beside a river beneath a wide oak. Birdsong drifted slowly around him. Sunlight dappled his arms. And the path opened once more. Not outward, but inward. A door not of wood, but of remembering. He closed his eyes. And returned. The lavender gate shimmered open. The mist curled around him like old friends. The garden welcomed him. The stars lowered. And Lysenna smiled as she rose from a bench of woven light. Are you ready to rest? She asked. Ash looked around. At the blossoms still blooming. At the pool reflecting endless stories. At the tower far beyond the trees. I'm ready, he said. But not to sleep. She tilted her head. To become. He stepped into the garden. The lavender brushed against his legs. The air sparkled faintly, as if memory were made of light. At the garden's heart, the pool glowed. He knelt beside it, touched the surface, and the dreams rose to meet him. Not just others, but his own. All the ones he had carried, and all the ones yet to be dreamed. He let them in, let them bloom. And in that moment, he was no longer a knight. He was the garden, the stillness, the hush before dreams. The whisper in the leaves. In villages across the land, people began to dream more deeply. Children slept longer. Old men awoke with tears and peace. Healers found new strength in herbs. And lovers began writing lullabies. No one remembered his face or his name, but when they passed a lavender bush, they would pause and breathe and feel. Some say that on certain nights, when the wind is just right and the moon is full, you can see a figure walking the edge of the mist, cloaked in starlight, feet silent on the ground. He never speaks, but you'll know him by the calm in your chest, by the way the trees lean toward him, by the way sleep seems easier just after he passes. And if you ever find a small stone, warm to the touch, beneath a blooming violet, take it in your hand, close your eyes, and listen. You just might hear a voice. So, slow, say, rest now. You're safe. The garden remembers.